Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Today I invite you into a legend that sails through the waves of ancient Greek poetry, a story sung by the winds and whispered by the sea. This tale follows Jason and his brave Argonauts on their perilous quest for the Golden Fleece, a journey of courage, loyalty, betrayal, and destiny, where mortals and gods intertwine upon the endless waters of fate. Disclaimer: the visuals in this video were created using artificial intelligence. There are no bloody or disturbing scenes. However, some moments have been designed for cinematic and emotional depth. If you are sensitive to such imagery, please keep this in mind before watching. If you wish to join me on these mythic journeys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a comment below telling me which story you'd like to explore next. I look forward to sailing through these timeless tales together, one legend at a time. Now, take another deep breath, relax your mind, and let the rhythm of the waves guide you, wishing you a peaceful sleep. The voyage of Jason and the Argonauts begins now. Jason and the Argonauts. Listen and heed. This is the tale that reaches back to the birth of the Golden Fleece, the story that one day would become the legend of Jason and the Argonauts. This story tells of a hero's struggle, under the shadow of a prophecy, to reclaim the throne that is rightfully his, and how the sea would test him in his quest. Around 1500 BCE, long before the Trojan War I told you about on this channel, this Mycenaean legend began to take shape. It was born amidst the maritime expeditions and the search for new sources that stretched from the Greek shores to the distant coasts of Colchis. After you finish this epic, if you haven't already, make sure to watch the Trojan War video on this channel. Although these two great narratives, the Argonauts' quest for the Golden Fleece and the 10-year siege of Troy, may seem different on the surface, they are in fact born from the same historical root: the Achaean, Mycenaean civilization's ambition to expand, to influence, and to command the power of the sea. In that video you will see much more clearly how these two myths intertwine. In the ancient mist-shrouded ages, when the mighty shadows radiating from the thunderous throne of great Zeus never hesitated to touch the fates of mortals directly, every breath and every step of man was woven from beginning to end into an unerring tapestry of prophecy by the ever-turning wheel of the fates, the Moirai. Even the deepest desires of humankind could abruptly shift course at a whisper from Olympus or a divine intervention. In that epic time, when heroes fought not only with their own strength, but also under the will of the gods, when every victory was a blessing descending from the sky, and every defeat a dark reflection of divine wrath, one of humanity's most magnificent and ocean-crossing adventures began. This was no ordinary expedition or trivial campaign. It was a grueling and perilous journey in pursuit of a throne's legitimacy, a priceless treasure, and ultimately the honor of all of Hellas, the Golden Fleece expedition, spoken of by ancient seers and stretching far across the seas. The chain of this epic began within the marble walls of the magnificent palace of the powerful King Athamas, whose lands were graced by heroes like Heracles and tragic Oedipus. Athamas was first married to Nephele, the cloud goddess representing the moist veil of the sky, and from this divine union twins were born: Phrixus, the clever son, and Helle, the graceful daughter, whose fates would sow the first bitter seeds of legend. But mortal weakness and a heart swayed by earthly desires altered the flow of divine order. Over time, the king's heart drifted from the cloud goddess toward Ino, daughter of Cadmos, whose beauty was matched only by her pride and ambition. From this second, passion-stained marriage came two sons, Iolcus and Melicertes. Ino's soul, consumed by a lust for the throne and a poisonous jealousy of Nephele's children, soon hatched a malevolent plot that threatened the prosperity of the entire kingdom. Blinded by her desire to make her own sons future rulers, Queen Ino devised a devious plan to remove Phrixus as a rival. She secretly burned or dried all the seed grain across the land. Once fertile and generous, the fields suddenly fell under an inexplicable curse of barrenness. A terrible famine loomed, bringing despair upon the people. In desperation, farmers and nobles alike turned to the sacred whispers of the oracle at Delphi, seeking the reason for this divine wrath. Yet the pure voice of prophecy was silenced and distorted by Ino's dark machinations. She bribed messengers and altered Apollo's sacred response. The famine could only end and the lands flourish again if Nephele's son Phrixus was sacrificed to Zeus himself. Faced with the fearful whispers and mounting pressure of his people, King Athamas's will broke like a slender branch, and he succumbed to the horror of sacrificing his own son. As the shadow of the ritual fell across the cold marble of the temple, the anguished cries of Nephele's innocent children echoed helplessly through the sky. And then, divine intervention came at last. The heavens tore open with terrifying speed, and like a bolt of lightning, a winged ram with a dazzling golden fleece descended to earth. Some whispered that it was sent by the messenger god Hermes. Others claimed it was the noble offspring of Poseidon and Theophany. The ram swooped down just as the sacrificial blade was about to strike, seizing both Phrixus and Helle upon its back and carrying them in an epic flight across the Black Sea to the legendary lands of Colchis. Tragically, however, the journey was interrupted above the narrow, deep strait separating Europe and Asia. Overcome by fear and dizziness, poor Helle slipped from the ram's back and fell into the churning waters below, drowning and joining the lost souls. In memory of this tragic event, the waters where Helle perished became known to future generations as Hellespont, the Sea of Helle, which corresponds to the waters surrounding today's Dardanelles. Phrixus, by the grace of fate, safely reached the shores of the foreign and mysterious kingdom of Colchis. In gratitude, he sacrificed the extraordinary golden-fleeced ram to Zeus Phineus, protector of fugitives and exiles, and presented its gleaming, miraculous fleece to King Aeetes of Colchis, son of the sun god Helios, brother to Circe and Pasiphae. Recognizing its value, King Aeetes welcomed Phrixus with great hospitality and even gave him his daughter Chalciope in marriage. Phrixus established a new home in Colchis and had 4 sons with Chalciope: Argus, Melas, Phrontis, and Cytisaurus. The magical fleece had transformed from a gift into a symbol of King Aeetes' kingdom's prosperity, power, and eternal abundance. Understanding the celestial power and vital importance of the fleece, King Aeetes decided to hide it from ordinary eyes. He nailed it to the trunk of a majestic oak in the sacred and inaccessible grove of Ares, the local war god, where it would be guarded by the most fearsome and terrifying protector, a colossal dragon with armor-like scales, never sleeping, eyes constantly alert. Thus, the golden fleece lay at the heart of legend. While the fleece hung in Ares' sacred oak in Colchis, far away in the fertile Thessalian region of Greece, the dark fire of a new throne struggle was kindling. The story moved to the ancient city of Iolcus, where the legitimate king was Aeson. But his ambitious brother Pelias, born of Poseidon's lineage and famed for his strength beneath the seas, had seized the throne by force, throwing King Aeson into a damp, lightless dungeon. Fearing that Pelias would kill her infant son Jason, Queen Polymede sent him to a remote mountain valley, away from mortal eyes, keeping him a closely guarded secret. The task of raising the hero fell to Chiron, the wise centaur with semi-divine knowledge and the untamed strength of horses, known for his justice and deep wisdom. Under Chiron's tutelage, Jason grew amidst the isolation of the mountains, learning the lessons of nature and philosophy, forging a steel-strong arm and a noble spirit. Time now intertwined with fate. Jason resolved to return to Iolcus to reclaim the throne stolen from his father. Meanwhile, Pelias, tormented by anxiety over the security of his rule, consulted the great oracle at Delphi. The prophecy was as clear as it was terrifying. Beware the man wearing a single sandal. This prediction was in fact part of the long-laid revenge plan of the powerful goddess Hera. Despite lavish offerings to Poseidon and other Olympians, Pelias had neglected to honor Hera, queen of the heavens. Hera now sought to punish his disrespect, using Jason as her instrument. From that moment, the young hero's every step in Iolcus would be touched by her immortal will. Shortly after the oracle's warning, on a day when winter waters surged, Jason lost one sandal while crossing the raging Anorus River. Entering the city with a wild leopard's hide draped over his shoulders, a simple garment clinging to his chest, and dark, flowing hair cascading down, he cut a striking figure far from ordinary. Most importantly, he wore only a single sandal, the sign spoken of in the sacred prophecy. Jason made his way to the palace, arriving in the midst of Pelias's lavish banquet, honoring Poseidon and the gods. Onlookers, awed by the fearless stranger, speculated whether he was the son of Apollo or Poseidon. Pelias, attempting to hide his fury, greeted him with a soft tone. Jason, with steady resolve, announced, "I am Jason, your kin," declaring his intent to reclaim the kingdom given to his father by Zeus. He proposed a peaceful solution. Pelias could retain the wealth and herds, but the throne should be returned to uphold justice. Pelias, outwardly calm, praised his young nephew's courage. But in truth, the cruel king had neither respect for the Delphi prophecy nor fear of Hera's vengeance. His only goal was to send Jason on an impossible mission. He concocted a false legend, claiming the soul of the deceased Phrixus could only rest if the Golden Fleece were retrieved from Colchis to Iolcus. Using his age as an excuse, he presented the perilous task to young, strong Jason, swearing on Zeus that the throne would immediately be his upon success. For a hero who valued honor above all else, this was a celestial challenge impossible to refuse. Jason accepted the dangerous call with courage and resolve. He quickly sent word across Greece, announcing the expedition to retrieve the Golden Fleece and inviting any brave hero to join him. And here Hera's revenge took its second step. She instilled an irresistible desire in the hearts of young warriors and famed heroes to take part in the Argonauts' voyage. Jason's brave and honorable call echoed across all of Hellas like a magnificent trumpet, from the peaks of the mountains to the shallow shores of the seas. Those who answered this call brought together the finest, noblest, and most versatile figures of mythology, the generation of heroes that preceded the legendary fighters of the future Trojan War. This legendary company, named the Argonauts, after the ship Argo, which would carry the expedition across the wild waves of the Black Sea, was bound together by destiny. Jason's fateful entry into the palace of the cruel Pelias, wearing only a single sandal, underscored the truth. The only path to reclaiming the throne by rightful means was to accomplish this seemingly impossible quest. For this reason, Jason entrusted the construction of the extraordinary ship, which would bear the burden of the voyage, to Argos, the master shipbuilder unparalleled in his craft, at the shining harbor of Pagasai in Iolcus. Argos designed the vessel not merely as a means of transport, but as one of the first great warships in history. According to Apollonius, it had 55 oars, and according to Apollodorus, 50, making it a massive structure. Its construction relied not only on Argus's skilled hands, but also on the direct guidance and blessing of the wise goddess Athena, Pallas Athena. What set Argo apart from all other ships in mythology was the sacred timber from the Dodona oak, imbued with the power of prophecy and speech, which Athena herself placed carefully in the ship's prow. This divine piece of wood gave the ship a spirit, granting it the ability to warn and guide the crew through storms when necessary. The name Argo derives from the Greek word meaning swift or bright white. Those who answered Jason's call were the brightest stars of mythology, many of divine lineage. Among the first to join was Heracles, son of Zeus, the hero of heroes and undoubtedly the strongest mortal, whose immense size required him to be positioned at the ship's central bench during construction to balance the heaviest load, alongside the other hero Ancaeus. Heracles was accompanied by his beloved companion Hylas. Also aboard were the famous twin sons of Zeus, the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, masters of warfare and boxing respectively. The winged sons of Boreas, Zetes and Calais donned golden scaled wings on their ankles, promising celestial speed to Argo. Fathers of future heroes also stood side by side. Pelias, husband of the sea goddess Thetis, and father of the great Achilles, and Telamon, father of Ajax, joined the voyage. Bringing harmony and rhythm to the ship was Orpheus, famed for his magical voice, who would protect the Argonauts from the deadly songs of the sirens with his lyre. Alongside him, by the command of the wise centaur Chiron, sailed the seer Idmon, who could foresee the future. Tiphys, the skillful helmsman, took command of the rudder, guiding Jason safely beyond the Black Sea into the unknown. When all the heroes assembled at the port of Pagasai, they performed an ancient sacred ritual, emphasizing that the journey was as much spiritual as it was physical. On the shore, they raised an altar of carefully gathered pebbles and sacrificed 2 flawless bulls to honor Apollo. Jason called upon Apollo as Actius, god of the coast, and Embasius, god of the voyage, pledging that if they returned safely and victorious, he would offer the great bulls in sacrifice. Libations were poured, and dedications were made in honor of Zeus, witness of the heavens. During the ceremony, the seer Idmon meticulously interpreted the flames and rising smoke of the sacrifices, declaring that the bright omen foretold the Argonauts' return with the fleece. Yet he also spoke a grim prophecy regarding his own fate. He would not survive the journey, dying far away on the Asian mainland from a fatal boar wound. Despite knowing this inescapable destiny, Idmon boarded the ship, driven by glory and heroism. At dawn, with the sacrifices completed, the master helmsman Tiphys called the crew to their oars. The most mystical moment came from the ship itself. Argo's speaking prow, thanks to the sacred Dodona timber placed by Athena, let out a strange, deep cry, urging the heroes to set sail from the harbor of Pagasae. The heroes took their positions. Heracles and Ancaeus, due to their massive size, were seated at the ship's center, their weight pressing the keel down. Jason, departing from his homeland, could not hide the few tears in his eyes as he bade farewell. Under the rhythm of Orpheus's lyre, the crew began to row. The music maintained a divine tempo, guiding the heroes swiftly forward. That day, all the gods from heaven watched in awe as Athena's masterpiece and the demigod heroes set forth. Even the water nymphs atop Mount Pelion, admired the grandeur of Argo on the waves. The most emotional farewell came from Chiron, Jason's mentor, who, with his wife Chariclo carrying the young Achilles in her arms, stood at the shore, dipping their feet into the surf, waving to the Argonauts. Safe travels and a return free from sorrow. Chariclo, meanwhile, showed the little Achilles, whom she had raised, one last time to his father Pelias, who stood on the ship's deck. Argo, having departed the sacred harbor of Pagasae and left behind Chiron's sorrowful farewell, began its journey across the legendary seas. Its first major stride toward the Black Sea carried it to one of all Hellas's strangest and most cursed places, the fog-shrouded island of Lemnos. This was a mysterious kingdom ruled entirely by women, cursed by the wrath of the goddess of love, Cypris, Aphrodite, where not a single man remained. The women had once neglected to honor the goddess who granted them life and beauty, and in vengeance, Cypris punished them with a foul, creeping curse that made their very flesh emit a disgusting stench. Under this curse, the men of Lemnos recoiled from their wives and sought companionship with women forcibly brought from neighboring Thrace. The humiliation and betrayal of their husbands quickly planted poisonous seeds of jealousy and rage in the hearts of the proud women of Lemnos. Not content with the curse, these women, who treated infidelity as a matter of honor, collectively decided on androctasia, the ruthless slaughter of men. In a single night, every male on the island, fathers, husbands, and defenseless sons alike, was mercilessly slain, their blood seeping into the soil. Only one survived, the island's aged king Thoas, whom his daughter, the now Queen Hypsipyle, secretly placed in a chest and set adrift at sea, sparing his life. As the Argonauts approached the shore, Hypsipyle and the other women chose to soften the shadow of their crime and the shame of this horrific massacre. Cypris, to lift the curse and prevent the line from dying out entirely, had planted in the hearts of the women an irresistible, sweet desire for the Argonauts. Queen Hypsipyle invited Jason, the leader of the heroes, into the gilded halls of her palace. Though Jason knew the weight of his mission far exceeded the comforts of Lemnos's harbor, he could not resist the goddess's enchanting spell, and he quickly grew close to Hypsipyle. The city of Lemnos overflowed with dances, feasts, banquets, and endless celebrations at the hero's arrival. Cyprus's sweet enchantment had seized the Argonauts' minds. They began to forget their quest for the Golden Fleece, spending their days in indulgence and revelry. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. Jason was deepest in this indulgence. With Hypsipyle, he would father two noble sons, Eunaeus and Nebraphonus. This stop was a bitter lesson, showing that the journey was not only a test of physical strength, but also a trial of moral will and sense of duty. Amid this intoxicating ease, almost the entire council of heroes had lost their sense of duty, except for one, Heracles. Tired of laziness, indulgence, and this seductive idleness, the son of Zeus finally decided to rebuke his companions harshly. His voice thundered through the palace's columned courtyards. "Wretched men! Have we come here driven by lust for women out of disrespect for our own citizens? Do we delight in lingering here, dragging our time across the soil of Lemnos? By dawdling so long with foreign women, we shall gain neither lasting glory nor eternal fame." His sharp, scornful words struck the Argonauts like lightning, and the sleeping sense of duty returned to their faces, painted with deep shame. Jason, out of profound respect for Heracles, felt no resentment. Instead, he immediately heeded the sacred call of his mission. When the time came to depart, Jason quietly left the harbor before dawn. The first light of morning shimmered like silver on the waters surrounding Lemnos, and the wind gently caressed the ship's sails. Queen Hypsipyle lingered on the dock, as if to delay for even a single second the inevitable farewell drawn by fate. Finally, with traces of noble pride and deep sorrow in her eyes, she spoke. "If you reach the dark shores of Colchis and return with the Golden Fleece from the palace of Aeetes, son of the sun," she said, her voice echoing sorrowfully across the waves, "do not forget me or the memories of this island. But my true wish, Jason, if one day you reclaim the throne of King Pelias and regain your rightful kingdom, then I will send our son Euneus and his twin Nebrophonus to you. Let them grow in the light of their father's rightful reign, carrying forward the noble legacy of their lineage." Jason etched her words into his heart. In her eyes shone a vow of farewell and hope for the future all at once. Then he turned toward the ship with measured steps. As Argo's sails unfurled, the only thing left behind was the echo of a farewell suspended between mortal love and the call of duty, carried away by the waves along Lemnos's shore. Argo, freed from the poisonous indulgence of mortal desires, departed the shores of Lemnos and set its course toward the sacred island of Samothrace, seeking both spiritual purification and divine protection. Guided by the wise counsel of Orpheus, whose lyre could soothe even the hardest rocks, the Argonauts participated in the ancient Orphic mysteries that cloaked the island in darkness and mysticism. These rites were not mere ceremonies. They were a spiritual armor, preparing their minds and souls for the horrors of the forthcoming clashing rocks and the ferocity of sea monsters. Having cleansed themselves and fortified their spirits, the Argonauts sailed toward the Hellespont, the Dardanelles, passing through the Propontis, Sea of Marmara, to reach Kyzikos Island, the first tragic stop in these waters. There they were greeted with great friendship by the young and hospitable King Kyzikos of the Doliones, whose lands were famed for their fertility. Forewarned by prophecy that his kingdom would be visited by divine heroes, the young king welcomed the Argonauts with a lavish feast. To observe the seas more closely and seek a blessing for their return, the heroes climbed the great Mount Dindymus and built a shrine on the shore in honor of Apollo. Yet the capricious fate woven into the heavens conspired to twist fortune into misfortune. As night fell, opposing winds from the sea caught the Argo, scattering the crew off course and driving them back toward the Doliones coast. In the pitch-black night and amid storm-driven chaos, neither the Argonauts nor the Doliones recognized each other. Mistaking the armored and armed figures for the ever-menacing Pelasgian raiders, the Doliones attacked without warning. King Kyzikos, abandoning his royal bed and newlywed bride Cleite, rushed to aid his people. Yet fate was unyielding. In the darkness, Jason unknowingly thrust his spear into the young king's chest, and Kyzikos fell, fulfilling the grim measure of his destiny. The battle raged until dawn. The Argonauts, Heracles, Pelias, Telamon, Meleager, and other elite warriors, unaware of the truth, defeating their unsuspecting hosts. When the sun rose, bloodied shores revealed the horrifying mistake. They had slain their hospitable friends. Jason was shattered, grief-stricken over killing his own ally. This bloody error shook the Argonaut Council's sense of duty to its core. Lemnos's seductive ease had been left behind, only to be replaced by the first stain of blood marking their quest for the Golden Fleece. The toll was not limited to King Cyzicus alone. His widow, Cleite, unable to bear the unbearable loss, hanged herself, becoming a tragic emblem of grief. Myth holds that the tears shed by the forest nymphs for her formed a fountain, later named the Cleite Spring, a lasting memorial to her sorrow. The weight of this cursed day and the persistent contrary winds forced the Argonauts to seek divine favor. Mopsus, the seer, studied the sacrificial smoke and the movement of stars, discovering the source of the storm and misfortune. It was the wrath of Rhea, the mother goddess of Dindymus in Phrygia. Absolute honor must be given to her. Jason heeded Mopsus's prophecy, awakening his companions and leading them to the peak of Mount Dindymus. There, they erected a shrine and prepared offerings. Argus, the master shipwright, carved a massive log of ancient olive wood into a sacred image under the shade of towering oaks. The Argonauts crowned themselves with oak leaves and began the sacrifice. Jason called upon Rhea, pouring libations and beseeching her to quell the storming winds. Under Orpheus's guidance, the young heroes performed a rhythmic martial dance, clashing swords against shields to disperse the lingering sorrow of Cyzicus's mourning. Nature responded. Trees bore abundant fruit, wildflowers sprang up beneath their feet, and forest animals emerged, tails wagging, showing their reverence. Rhea performed a final miracle. From the previously dry summit, a clear spring gushed forth, later named the Fountain of Jason. With the rites completed and dawn breaking, the winds calmed entirely. Leaving behind the tragedy at Cyzicus and the lost days of Lemnos, the Argonauts rode once more, their hearts strengthened for the perils yet to come. Argo, cleansed from the bloody waters of the Propontis and the tragic mistake at Cyzicus, turned its course toward the fertile green lands of Mysia, roughly corresponding to modern-day Mudania. Unlike the previous misadventures, the Mysians received the Argonauts not with hostility, but with generous hospitality, offering them precious gifts. After the emotional devastation at Cyzicus and the innocent blood spilled there, the heroes sought a brief respite to recover their spirits. The practical reason for this stop, however, was that Heracles' massive oar, the instrument of his unmatched strength, had been broken during the voyage. As the greatest and most powerful rower, Heracles entered the dense, shadowy forest of Mysia to find a suitable tree for a new oar, while the rest of the Argonauts prepared for a feast with the Mysians. Yet it was this venture into the forest that would trigger one of mythology's most poignant and tragic tales. At the center of this story was Heracles' cherished companion and beloved, the young Hylas, son of Theodamas. Tasked with fetching fresh water for the evening meal, Hylas strayed from the crowd, carrying a delicate bronze jug, and approached a sacred spring called Pegae, a place hallowed by the dances of forest nymphs. As the full moon illuminated his rosy cheeks and graceful demeanor, a water nymph emerged from the clear waters. Struck by Hylas's beauty, the nymph, under the enchantment of Aphrodite's will, became irresistibly drawn to him. In an instant, she entwined him with her arms, dragged him into the waters, and Hylas vanished beneath the surface, captured by divine desire. This innocent abduction would dramatically alter the course of the Argonauts' expedition. Polyphemus, son of Elatus, heard Hylas's mournful cries from the spring and rushed to help, assuming he had been kidnapped by brigands. In the forest, he encountered Heracles searching for a suitable tree, and the tragic news reached him. Heracles, stricken with panic and grief, abandoned all thought of the Golden Fleece and the Argo, calling out, "Hylas! Hylas!" as he disappeared into the green shadows of the woods. Jason and the remaining Argonauts waited, uncertain and anxious. But when Heracles did not return, they resolved to continue the voyage without him. Anger and frustration erupted among the crew. Telamon accused Jason of deliberately leaving Heracles behind, claiming it was to prevent the hero's glory from overshadowing the mission. Jason, careful to respond, explained that the fury stemmed from grief over a lost companion, and thus sought to calm Telamon's ire. At that moment, an extraordinary figure rose from the sea. It was Glaucus, the prophetic sea deity and interpreter of Nereus. Holding the Argo's hull with one hand, he addressed the Argonauts, revealing that Heracles' absence was ordained by Zeus himself. The hero's fate was to undertake further labors for Eurystheus and ultimately achieve immortality. Therefore, they were not to grieve or blame themselves. Glaucus further explained the fates of Polyphemus and Hylas. Polyphemus was destined to establish a famed city at the mouth of the Sius River and fulfill his destiny in distant Chalybes. Hylas had been claimed by the nymph as her eternal companion. He also warned Zetes and Calais, sons of Boreas, that their interference in Heracles' search for Hylas would incur divine retribution. Glaucus' revelations brought relief to Jason. Leaving Heracles behind was no betrayal or neglect. It was divine will. With that, the Argo resumed its journey, lightened physically by the absence of the Titan, yet heavy with the emotional weight of his loss. Mysia's verdant shores faded behind them, while the crew confronted the unknown perils of the Black Sea, and Jason bore the responsibility of leading the mission without the strength and presence of his most formidable ally. Every stroke of the oars echoed with the silent lament of hearts torn between sorrow and duty, while tensions, like that between Telamon and Jason, were eased by Glaucus's prophetic intervention, affirming that Heracles would follow his own destined path and would not sail with the Argonauts to Colchis. This was an acceptance of fate and a divine necessity. The Argonauts were now continuing their journey eastward, not by pushing the limits of mortality, but by following the trace of a great divine plan woven by Zeus and Hera. The Argo, leaving behind the calm waters of the Sea of Marmara, advanced toward the gates of the Black Sea, Pontus Euxinus, surrounded by Bithynian tribes in the land of the Bebryces, where rough power reigned. This was the first stop along the Anatolian coastline in one of the greatest passes of the ancient world, corresponding to present-day Chalcedon, Kadikoi. Ruling these wildlands was King Amycus, enormous in stature and blinded by arrogance, said to be a son of the sea god Poseidon. Amycus was renowned as a formidable and invincible boxer who challenged every foreign sailor arriving on his shores. His ritual of tyranny was to force newcomers into a duel, defeat them, and humiliate them precisely at the moment when the Argo's crew had lost their strongest heroes and were most vulnerable. King Amycus, casting his massive shadow over the shore, challenged the Argonauts, Let your strongest fighter step forward and box with me, or will you return in fear without even drawing your ship onto the shore? This challenge was a slap of pride aimed at the Argonauts' wounded honor after Heracles' departure. Heracles' absence was not a weakness, but a sacred duty to be proven. A voice rose from the assembly of heroes, Pollux, Polydeuces. He was one of Zeus's twin sons, one of the Dioscuri. Raised in Sparta's harsh discipline, he was unparalleled in the technique of boxing and divine nobility. Pollux stepped forward to confront Amycus's brute force with agility and sacred technique. On his face, there was neither anger nor fear, only the reflection of perfect concentration and the serenity of one challenging death. The match was to be conducted according to ancient boxing rules, with bare hands, but using Quistis gloves made of leather and metal, which had lethal effects. This was not a sport, but a divine judgment. King Amycus stood like a mountain with the unshakable strength inherited from Poseidon. His arm swings were as wild and crushing as a forest fire. When the fight began, Amycus immediately launched a savage and primitive attack. Each punch shook the air it struck, echoing like the hammer of a sledge. Pollux, against these massive waves, used the suppleness of a snake rather than the hardness of a rock. He narrowly dodged every enormous blow from Amycus, patiently observing how the brute's pride drained his strength. Pollux's strategy was based on the power of intelligence. He was a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment, never wasting his energy. As Amycus's fatigue increased, his crude attacks became slower, his blocks more open. Pollux suddenly moved from defense to attack. He struck the giant with several quick and precise blows, making him stagger a step. Amycus, in fury, delivered his final and greatest punch, revealing a brief opening. At that moment, Pollux, combining the agility inherited from Zeus and the technique learned in Sparta, leapt forward like lightning. His Quistis-reinforced punch struck Amycus's temple like the tip of a spear. The blow was not just a punch, but divine judgment. Amycus's enormous body collapsed to the ground like a boulder. There was no longer any contempt in his eyes, only the void of absolute defeat. The son of Poseidon was dead. After Amycus's death, the people of Bebryces rose in anger and rebellion. The Argonauts were forced to draw their swords against this furious crowd. Under the leadership of the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, the Argonauts routed the disorganized attack of the Bebryces in a brief but bloody conflict. Pollux's victory proved that the Argo possessed divinely noble warriors, even in the absence of its strongest heroes. This event also benefited King Lycus of Mysia. Amycus's tyranny had ended, and Lycus could reclaim his lands at the entrance to the Black Sea. The brief peace brought by victory gave way to the wild currents of the Bosporus at the entrance to the Black Sea and a violent storm. The wind and massive waves tossed the Argo uncontrollably toward the Thracian coast to the shore of Salmydessus. Here the Argonauts encountered a tragic figure who would guide them, yet needed help most, the Thracian seer Phineus. Phineus was an extraordinary seer endowed by Apollo with the ability to foresee future events. Though his origin is told differently, some say he was the son of Poseidon, others of Agenor, the cause of his curse was clear: the wrath of Zeus. Phineus had perfectly revealed the sacred will of the gods to humanity, and for this the pleasant light of his eyes was taken, condemning him to eternal darkness. The accounts of the cause of his blindness deepened his tragedy. The most common view was that he revealed Zeus's secrets. A harsher account claims that he was punished by the gods after his stepmother Idea slandered him, leading to the blinding of his own sons. Yet blindness was not the end of Phineus's torment. Zeus, finding this punishment insufficient, sent the seer a continuous torment that would drive any mortal to madness: the Harpies. According to Apollonius, the Harpies were daughters of Thaumas and Electra. Their names were Aello, storm speed, and Ocypete, swift flyer. They were winged, with women's faces, hooked beaks, and sharp talons, known as the hound-like agents of mighty Zeus. Phineus could never enjoy food brought by his neighbors. Whenever a feast was set, the Harpies swooped down from the clouds with cries like breathless lightning. They viciously stole the food and fled. The most unbearable torment was the loathsome stench they left behind. Everything else was covered with the smell of decay. The stench was so intolerable that even a heart made of diamond would not dare approach. Phineus, reduced to skin and bone by hunger, and this continuous torment appeared like a living dream. His skin was layered with filth, and his body was held together only by skill. He was a living curse. When Phineus heard the Argo and the footsteps of the heroes, he understood. With tired and trembling steps, he reached the door by feeling along the walls. He pleaded with the Argonauts in the name of Zeus, who had brought them under Hera's special protection, to rescue a sorrowful man. He also whispered that he knew through prophecy that his rescuers were the sons of the north wind, Boreas. The blind seer Phineus expected to be freed from the curse that had fallen over his food and the torment of the Harpies with the help of the Argonauts. The Argonauts prepared a feast of fresh food, and as soon as Phineus touched it, the Harpies swooped down from the highest layers of the sky, viciously snatching the food and leaving behind their foul-smelling remnants. To carry out this sacred task, Boreas's winged sons, Zetes and Calais, immediately stepped forward. These two brothers, with dark wings adorned with golden scales on their ankles, drew their swords and launched themselves into the sky with divine force. The chase continued to the floating islands at the entrance of the Black Sea. Though the Harpies were said to be faster than even the west wind, thanks to the tireless power granted by Zeus, Zetes and Calais were about to catch them. Just as the two brothers were about to strike the Harpies with their swords, Iris, the messenger of the gods, swiftly descended from the heavens. Iris addressed the sons of Boreas, declaring, "It is not permissible to kill Zeus's hounds." However, in return, she made a terrifying and sacred oath. "I swear upon the waters of the river Styx that these birds will never approach Phineus's house again." Faced with this absolute assurance, which binds the fundamental laws of the universe, Zetes and Calais sheathed their swords. The Harpies fled in fear to their caves in Minoan Crete. Freed from torment and cleansed, Phineus rewarded the Argonauts with a grand feast. Phineus, while avoiding once again drawing Zeus's wrath upon himself by revealing the god's will, offered his prophecies to the Argonauts as life-saving navigational guidance. The blind seer, in place of his darkened eyes, now unfolded the clear map of fate itself. His first and most urgent warning concerned the terrifying clashing rocks, Symplegades or blue rocks, waiting right at the entrance of the Black Sea. These rocks were not rooted to the earth beneath them. They constantly crashed into each other, shattering to dust and mist anything attempting to pass between them. Phineus gave a precise divine instruction to overcome this deadly obstacle: the dove test. First, release a dove from the ship and entrust the trial to it. If the dove manages to fly safely through the rocks and escape into the open sea, then do not hesitate to follow. But if it cannot pass through and is crushed in between, turn back. If you can make it, Hold tightly to your oars and cut through the narrow throat of the sea, for the light of salvation lies as much in your strength as in your prayer, and under the protection of Hera." Phineus also emphasized the importance of this passage. Once a ship passed through the rocks, they would be fixed in place forever. By overcoming this barrier, the Argonauts would make the passage into the Black Sea permanently safe for all mankind. As the ship approached the rocks, the crashing sound grew into a deafening roar, striking terror into the hearts of the crew. Jason, following Phineus's command, released the dove into the air with a silent prayer. The bird barely escaped into the open sea, losing only a few tail feathers, which were caught between the rocks and fell into the water. It was a divine sign that the passage was possible, but perilously dangerous. With this heavenly approval, Jason acted at once. They threw all their strength into the oars. Argo, slicing through the foaming waves, plunged at full speed into the narrow strait. As the ship reached the midpoint, the rocks thundered together. The wooden hull groaned and giant waves battered the deck. Yet through Hera's unwavering protection and the heroes' united, determined rowing power, Argo passed through that deadly path. Once the ship was safe, the heroes looked back. The rocks no longer moved. Silently, they drew close together and froze forever, opening the gate to the Black Sea for all sailors to come. Having passed the simple gates, the Argonauts entered the vast and mysterious waters of Pontus Euxinus, the hospitable sea. Phineus described in detail the coastal dangers and notable places that would guide their journey. First, they would pass the wide and treacherous Cape Carambis, modern Sinop Karempe Cape, where the northern winds split fiercely in two. Then they would sail along the great Aegialus coast, where the mighty rivers Halys and Iris, the Kızılırmak and Yeşilırmak, poured their waters into the sea. Their true trial, however, would be at the mouth of the river Thermodon, Terme River, in the land of the Amazons. This Themyscirian cape was home to a stone temple dedicated to Ares, the god of war, and to the legendary warrior women who rode across those lands. After this, their route would lead to the shores of the Chalybes, ironworkers known as the most wretched of men, who lived in rough lands and were masters of the forge. Beyond this land of smiths, they would encounter the Mossynoeci, who lived in wooden towers called Mossines. The seer also listed the peoples neighboring Colchis, the Philyres, Macrones, Betrayal, Saperes, and Bizeres. Phineus also described Colchis, the Argonauts' final destination. At the mouth of the river Phasis, Rioni, they would see the towers of Cetian Aeetes and the shadowed sacred grove of Ares. The seer's last words revealed the terror of their ultimate task. There, guarding the fleece spread upon the boughs of an oak, watches a dreadful monster, an immortal, sleepless dragon. Neither day nor night can sweet slumber close its restless eyes. Phineus warned that once they obtained the Golden Fleece, their return path would differ, and they must heed the artful aid of the goddess of Cyprus, the love of Medea. Yet fearing Zeus's wrath, he dared not fully reveal this secret. After passing the Symplegades, the Argonauts reached the land of the Mariandynians on the Anatolian coast, where they were received with hospitality by King Iolcus. Yet this stop brought the crew of Argo double grief and deep mourning. As the prophet Idmon had foretold he would die upon the Asian mainland, his fate was fulfilled here. During a hunt, he was killed by a huge and savage wild boar. His death once again proved the inevitability of prophecy. Following Idmon's loss came the most devastating blow, The death of Tiphys, the ship's vital captain and helmsman. Tiphys's passing filled the crew with unspeakable sorrow and uncertainty. The Argonauts were so overcome with grief that they ceased even to think about their voyage. In this crisis, either Erginus or Nauplius, or Ancaeus in some versions, took over the duty of helmsman. When the needle of fate turned Argo's sails toward the unknown depths of the Black Sea, Pontus Euxinus, the heroes' hearts felt not joy, but a heavy weight. They had left behind the terror of the clashing rocks, the Symplegades, but the victory had come at a terrible cost. Their reliable helmsman Tiphys and the wise seer Idmon had been buried in the land of the Mariandynians. These two great losses left a pain in the Argonauts' souls, like a mother's two tears, replacing the once joyful departure with a silence and sorrow that settled deep into the ship's timbers. Upon Jason's shoulders rested not only the duty to retrieve the Golden Fleece, but also the burden of these deaths. They now sailed toward the land of Aeetes, son of the ocean's daughter Perseus, and through uncharted waters, guided only by the prophecies of the blind seer Phineus. His words were no longer mere counsel, but a map of destiny itself, woven by Zeus's will and Hera's steadfast protection of the Argonauts. After the mourning and rest in the land of the Mariandynians, Argo, as if eager to escape the memory of sorrow, set sail eastward. Propelled by the steady southern winds, the heroes kept their eyes turned southward toward the dark, rugged coasts of Anatolia. The first major landmark on their route was Cape Carambis, modern Sinop Karempe, said to be the point where the north winds split and which rose over the sea like a massive shield. This cape was a gateway into the vastness of the Black Sea, a sharp fracture in the geography. Beyond it stretched the wide Aegealus coast, reaching toward infinity, as if it were a place where the sea ended but the world had yet to begin. In this way, even amid the unknown, the Argonauts found a sense of direction and safety. Each word of prophecy was like an ancient and precious parchment held with unshakable faith. Phineus's detailed ethnographic catalogue was coming to life. Every coastline they encountered was the homeland of a community with its own distinct mythological or cultural character. This voyage was, in a sense, an anthropological exploration, an extension of Hellas's, Greece's light of civilization toward the dark and fertile lands of Colchis. Beyond the shores, deep within the inland geography, beyond the river Thermodon, Thermae, the first people they encountered were the Calibes. When Phineus described them, even as he called them the most wretched of men, he could not hide the respect he felt for their craftsmanship. That phrase had bound the destiny of the Calibes to the barrenness of their land and their endless labor. As they approached the land of the Calibes, they noticed the change in the air. The salty scent of the sea breeze gave way to the bitter, sharp smell of ash, smoke, and scorched metal. It was as though the ship was sailing toward the chimney of a colossal blacksmith's forge. Even the sky had turned grey with the smoke from the ever-burning furnaces, and the sunlight struggled to reach this gloomy land. The shores were covered in ash-colored sands and dark, sooty rocks. Their land was just as described, harsh, barren, and infertile. The Calibes had nothing else to sustain their lives apart from this rugged terrain. Instead of cultivating the soil for grain, they transformed it with fire and hammer. Their lives consisted of a relentless cycle of exhausting, unending labor from dawn to dusk. These people had achieved a level of mastery in ironworking that was unmatched. Despite their weary and worn-out bodies, The weapons and tools they produced could rival those of the finest craftsmen in Hellas. For them, iron was both a means of survival and a curse. Ancient historians believed that these masters descended from the Chaldees, a Proto-Georgian tribe, and that they had developed iron mining and steel production technology as early as the 14th century BCE, around the canyon of the river Halys, the Kızılırmak. The voyage of the Argonauts was not merely a geographical expedition, it was also a witness to an advanced metallurgical technology that had blossomed on these shores centuries before Western civilization. While searching for the Golden Fleece, Jason and his companions realized that wealth was not limited to gold. Iron, too, was the foundation of civilization. The smoke of the Chalybes' forges would soon become the smoke of a hero's farewell. According to prophecy, by the will of Zeus, one of the Argonauts, Polyphemus, would meet his destined end within this vast land of the Chalybes. When that moment arrived, Polyphemus would leave the ship and remain in the land of the smiths. Thus the gods would set the assembly of the Argonauts to the exact number that was meant to reach Colchis. Argo departed from the grey and smoky shores of the Chalybes, carried by a lingering wind of sorrow. Behind them remained the fate of Polyphemus and the bitter memory of Hylas. As the Argonauts sailed eastward, they were astonished by how sharply the geography and ways of life changed. Right after the barren and smoky lands of the Chalybes, they reached the territory of the Tibareni people, who lived beyond the Genetaean Cape, named after Zeus, god of hospitality. This tribe was the complete opposite of the crude misery of the Chalybes. As Phineus's prophecy had foretold, they were a people rich in sheep. The shores gleamed white with the wool of countless grazing flocks, whispering a peaceful stillness that was a balm after the hammering clamor of the Chalybes. These people were hospitable, and the heroes had the rare luxury of renewing their sails and resting their spirits for a short while. Yet the Black Sea was always a realm of strangeness and marvels. The Mossynoeci, neighbors of the Tibareni, were the most unusual people the Argonauts had ever encountered. The Mossynoeci dwelled on the well-forested mainland of the Black Sea, beneath the mountains. Their way of life was a kind of manifesto of nature itself. The heroes, gazing from the ship, watched the scene in astonishment. The Mossynoeci built their homes not within the trees, but from them, tower-like wooden structures they called mossines, from which the people took their own name. It was as though human hands had raised a wooden city reaching skyward from the heart of nature. To the Argonauts, these tower houses stood far beyond the architectural forms familiar to Western civilization. Primitive, yet at the same time, a testament to advanced craftsmanship. These people lived by the forest's own order, using the trees as homes, as fortresses, as worlds unto themselves. The Argonauts passed silently among these strange towers, for Phineus had warned them not to engage unnecessarily with this tribe. Each tower was a symbol of the growing sense of otherness and mysticism that deepened as they approached Colchis. Leaving behind the wooden towers of the Mossynoeci, Argo's course turned toward one of the Black Sea's most renowned and fearsome mythic landmarks, the mouth of the river Thermodon, modern Terme River, and the land of the warrior women, the Amazons. Phineus had told the Argonauts that the Thermodon, after winding across the vast mainland, flowed into a quiet bay at the Themiscyrian promontory, the region around the city of Terme. The coastline stood in stark contrast to the pastoral calm of the Tibareni. The air was filled with tension and the hiss of steel. The sands along the shore carried not the tranquility of an ordinary beach, but the taut energy of a battlefield. The Amazons lived upon the plain of Doantian. Phineus had warned that these women were no gentle foes and did not uphold justice. Their only concern was grievous insolence and the deeds of Ares, the god of war. The blood of Ares flowed through their veins like poison, filling them with an unquenchable thirst for battle. Unfortunately, the Argonauts arrived on these shores at a time when the Amazons were in full war preparation. The echoes of war drums, the neighing of horses, and the piercing war cries of women sent a chill through the hearts of the heroes. These were no ordinary mortals. They were the daughters of Ares and the nymph Harmonia. The god of war had bestowed upon them a fearless and unstoppable warrior nature. The Amazons were divided into 3 tribes ruled by Treachery. Along every stretch of the coast, armies were forming, bronze helmets gleaming, bows drawn taut. As they drew closer to shore, it became clear that conflict was inevitable. Amazon cavalry galloped along the beaches, turning their arrows and spears toward the ship. Jason, preparing his comrades for battle, raised his eyes despairingly toward the sky. To launch a landing against such an army from the sea would be suicide. But just as the threat of a bloody clash reached its peak, the swiftest of Zeus's winds, Argestes, intervened by divine will. A fierce, powerful gust filled Argo's sails so forcefully that the ship was snatched away from the shore. Before the Amazons could complete their war preparations, Argo was carried swiftly out of range. Once again, the protection of Hera and the divine will of Olympus had shielded the Argonauts from a needless, fate-altering conflict. The heroes looked with gratitude toward the wind that had spared them from the wrath of Ares' daughters. According to Phineus's prophecy, after passing safely by the Amazons, the Argonauts' course would lead them to a significant next destination, a desolate island. The seer had instructed them to beach their ship there, for it was inhabited by countless wild birds, and the Amazon queens Treachery and Antiope had built a stone temple on the island in honor of Ares, the god of war. The island echoed with the sharp, shrill cries of birds. The atmosphere was thick with the ominous and blood-stained energy of Ares himself. When the Argonauts pulled their ship onto the rocky, treacherous shore, they waited as Phineus had commanded. The prophet had told them to remain there, for they would soon receive a help beyond words, and that this aid would rise from the bitter sea. This mysterious prophecy rekindled a seed of hope in Jason's heart. Their wait was not long. Amid the desolation and the cries of birds, the remnants of a wreck appeared in the water. A group sent from Argo rescued 4 young men who had survived near the debris: Argus, Melas, Phrontis, and Cytisaurus. Their bodies were battered by the salt and wind of the sea, and fear and exhaustion flickered in their eyes. These young men were survivors of a shipwreck, and soon it became clear that they were the golden key to the Argonauts' fate. They were the sons of Phrixus, the grandson of Helen, the ancestor of all Greeks, who had once sought refuge in Colchis with the Golden Fleece. Jason learned with great joy that these young men were his own kinsmen, for his father Cretheus and Phrixus's father Athamas were brothers. This was the help beyond words that Phineus had foretold. These youths had been born and raised in Colchis. They offered Jason invaluable knowledge of the kingdom's hidden paths, the intrigues within King Aeetes' palace, and the dangers surrounding the Golden Fleece. Without them, Jason's infiltration of Colchis would have been nearly impossible. The rescue of Argus was no coincidence. It was a flawless part of Hera's divinely woven plan of fate. The sons of Phrixus warned Jason that obtaining the Golden Fleece was no simple task, and that Aeetes ruled his land with merciless cruelty, his strength and war cry rivaling that of Ares himself. The fleece, they said, was nailed to an oak tree within Ares' sacred grove and guarded by an immortal, sleepless dragon born from Typhon and Echidna's monstrous bloodline. Armed with the vital knowledge given by the sons of Phrixus, the Argonauts reached the final stage of their journey. They left behind the neighboring peoples of Colchis one by one, the Philyres, the Macrones, the Betrayal, the Saperes, and the Bizerres. Colchis, modern western Georgia, was described in ancient sources as a mighty and wealthy kingdom. Its capital was called Aya, or Kutaya. According to myth, it was ruled by the powerful King Aeetes, son of Helios, the sun god, and the Oceanid Perses, and brother to the sorceress Circe. The Argonauts steered their ship toward the mouth of the river Phasis, the modern Rioni River, where the capital stood. As they approached the river's silent, marshy delta, they saw through the mist the towering spires of Scythian Aeetes. These towers proclaimed that Colchis had, since ancient times, been one of the world's richest lands for mining and refining precious metals such as gold and silver. The ultimate goal of Jason's quest, the Golden Fleece, hung nailed to a centuries-old oak within Ares' sacred grove. The dragon never allowed its eyes to close, neither by day nor by night. Yet the Greeks aboard Argo knew that beneath this magnificent myth lay a material and technological truth. The Golden Fleece was not merely a mythical prize, but a symbol of an advanced gold extraction method practiced in Colchis' mountainous region of Sphaneti, where thick sheep fleeces were laid across riverbeds to trap floating gold dust. Jason's true mission was to bring back to Hellas not only the fleece itself, but also the knowledge of this technique and the wealth of Colchis' metals. When Argo approached the Phasis River, Jason, taking Phrixus' sons with him, walked toward King Aeetes' palace. Obtaining the Golden Fleece would now require more than simply outmaneuvering a sleepless dragon. It would also require persuading a powerful and proud king. King Aeetes received Jason and the Argonauts in his palace, yet he feared losing his kingdom, for a prophecy had warned him that if the Golden Fleece were taken from Colchis, he would lose his throne. Entering Aeetes' magnificent yet threatening palace, Jason declared that his aim was to take the Golden Fleece and return to his homeland, Hellas. For Pelias believed in the prophecy that Phrixus' spirit would not return to his country until the fleece came back. Jason presented himself merely as a servant sent to fulfill Pelias' orders, and said he was willing to pay Aeetes a price rather than seize the fleece by force. Even Phrixus' son, Argus, mentioned that Jason had offered to defeat Aeetes' eternal enemies, the Sauromatide tribes, and bring their lands under the king's dominion. Jason also emphasized that he and his companions were sons or grandsons of immortals, attempting to honor Aeetes without inflaming his pride. Although King Aeetes appeared pleased by Jason's courteous words and Argus's polite praise, he harbored a dual intent. He would either kill them immediately or test their strength. The latter suited his proud and power-hungry nature, inherited from Helios. Aeetes straightened proudly on his throne and spoke to Jason with arrogance, declaring that he paid no heed to tales of cowardice told by rulers in Greece. If they were truly of divine descent and strong enough to take foreigners' possessions, then they could attempt to seize the Golden Fleece. But before that could happen, Aeetes announced that he would test Jason in a deadly contest that would also display his own power. Resembling an army born of fire, iron, and seed, King Aeetes listed the first task. his lips curved in a faint mockery and his eyes glimmering as they measured the stranger's courage. The first trial was the bronze-footed bulls and the field of Ares. Aeetes possessed 2 giant bulls grazing in the vast plain of the war god Ares, with bronze hooves and fire spewing from their nostrils. These beasts had once been a gift from the smith god Hephaestus. Their eyes were as red as molten metal, and their breath as scorching as a forge. Jason's task was to tame the bulls alone and yoke them. Once the bulls were restrained, Jason had to plow the fierce fields of Ares for 4 plowgates. Aeetes implied that he had himself yoked the bulls in the morning and harvested by afternoon. Jason had to break the field with a plow made of adamant, extraordinarily hard. This task required not only physical strength but also divine endurance against fire. Jason had to withstand flames, smoke, and bronze hooves beyond any ordinary human capacity. In the eyes of the king of Colchis, this was a feat no ordinary hero could accomplish. Immediately after plowing, Jason had to undertake a second deadly task. Aeetes gave him the terrifying teeth of a dragon to be sown as seeds. These teeth were not Demeter's corn. When planted, they would sprout a deadly crop. From the ground, fully armed warriors in bronze armor, the Earthborn or Spartoi, would emerge. These men were born solely to fight Jason. He had to face and cut down this sprouting army alone within a single day, using only his sword or spear. Aeetes emphasized the mythological weight and danger of this task. These teeth were half of the dragon's teeth sown by Cadmus in Thebes. Jason was to confront a full army emerging from the earth alone, a struggle beyond human comprehension. Aeetes left his final words upon Jason with icy arrogance. "And if you complete these tasks successfully, you will carry the Golden Fleece to the king's palace on the same day. Do not expect to receive it before then, for it is unbecoming for a brave man to bow to a coward." Jason returned from Aeetes' palace, approaching the ship where the Argonauts had gathered, his heart heavy with gloom and sorrow. His companions greeted him joyfully and asked what had happened, yet the exhaustion on Jason's face told the story. Gathering all the strength in his voice, he replied, "Friends, the heart of the merciless Aeetes is wholly filled with wrath against us, for neither I nor any of you asking questions will reach our goal." Jason had accepted this task because there was nothing better to do. Taking the Golden Fleece required superhuman strength, and Jason's abilities were insufficient against fire-breathing bulls and an army springing from the ground. Despair was etched onto the hero's face. He had come to Colchis feeling more like a prisoner bound by fate than a victor. Yet Jason's acceptance of this task, unwittingly, became part of the divine will of Hera and Cypris Aphrodite, serving his path to revenge. Jason had once carried an elderly woman, Hera, across a river and was rewarded by her divine favor. The blind prophet Phineus had also advised the Argonauts that their route after Aeetes would differ and that they should consider the artful aid of the Cypriot goddess for their return from Colchis. As Jason recounted these perils to his companions in despair, the Argonaut council, weighed by duty, immediately resolved to act. At Jason's request, Telamon and Aethalides went to Aeetes' palace to obtain the dragon teeth. Aeetes, convinced Jason could not complete the task, handed over the teeth easily so they could be returned to Argo. Faced with the horror of the task and Aeetes' cruel demands, Jason's only hope now lay not in human strength, but in divine and magical intervention. In the shadow of King Aeetes on this foreign land, fate was moving according to the designs of Zeus and Hera. Hera descended from her throne on Olympus with majestic silence, gliding down from the highest, most mysterious layers of Zeus's endless sky to execute her plan. Her divine and piercing gaze could clearly see the heart of a young soul in the misty lands of Colchis. Medea, daughter of King Aeetes, rebellious, proud, arrogant, with the magical power inherited from her father, yet beneath all this pride, a young heart still defenseless before love. Executing this vital and delicate intervention was not merely an order, it was the intricate weaving of fate itself. Thus Hera first summoned Erato, the sweet-spoken muse of love carrying the power of Cyprus, Aphrodite, for assistance. Yet this was not enough. The only way to achieve her aim was to go directly to the source. So she made her way with splendor to the glittering marble palace of Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire. Her purpose was unmistakable, to immediately strike Medea's heart with the fateful arrow of Aphrodite's irresistible, mischievous son, Eros. That arrow, as is known, would instill not merely innocent passion, but an overwhelming, destructive desire for Jason in Aeetes' rebellious daughter. Hera, accompanied by her mentor Athena, and adorned in the grandeur of heavy gold-embroidered cloaks, arrived at Aphrodite's glittering palace. The scene brought a faint, mocking smile to their faces. Within the shining courtyard, the god of love, Eros, though possessed of power to move the world, was still only an impudent, carefree child, playing innocently with a bright ball. Hera made an irresistible bribe to the unruly scoundrel, whose disobedience was famed even among the gods, whispering in a sweet, coaxing tone, "O impudent scoundrel, why do you smile at victory? Have you deceived him thus and defeated this innocent child unjustly? Come, prepare to fulfill the task I will set for you, and I shall give you Zeus's most exquisite toy, the perfectly rounded ball made by our dear nurse Adrastea, for him when our father still lived like a child in the Idaean cave. Not even Hephaestus could craft a finer toy." Hera continued describing the ball's uniqueness, watching Eros's eyes sparkle. Every thread of the ball is pure gold, with double stitches tracing elegant circles, yet the stitching is skillfully hidden, and over all is a dark blue spiral. If you throw it with your hands, it will streak across the sky like a star blazing. "I will give this to you," she concluded, "and you shall strike with your arrow, making Aeetes' daughter fall in love with Jason, and do not delay, for hesitation diminishes the value of my gratitude and this generous gift." A toy surpassing Hephaestus's craft, a golden sphere that would blaze like a star in the sky. Eros could not resist this irresistible offer. In that instant, he dropped the simple ball, drew his bow, and sent the unwavering, trembling arrow toward Colchis. The arrow of desire, of spreading passion, crossed all the distance between Olympus and the earth in a single breath, flying to the misty palace of Colchis, to Medea's hidden chamber. The arrow struck directly into the yet unawakened heart of the young sorceress. At that moment, divine intervention was complete. In Medea's soul, a blaze she had never known, foreign yet consuming, ignited an irrepressible, destructive passion and desire. This burning, irresistible feeling for Jason would now irrevocably change her fate, her family, and the entire kingdom of Colchis forever. As Jason departed from the presence of King Aeetes, a look of pride still intact on his face, the weight of despair settling upon him completely enveloped his spirit. Medea, Aeetes' daughter, secretly watched Jason from the dim corridors of the Colchian palace. Aeetes had tasked the Greek hero with impossible challenges that surpassed human limits, like yoking the fire-breathing bulls and sowing the dragon's teeth. The sharp mix of sorrow and defiance on Jason's face ignited Medea's heart like a glowing ember under the venom of Eros. Jason's appearance, what grace, what majesty it held. The son of Aeson seemed to carry, in his very stance, the strength of the god of war Ares and the elegance of Apollo, god of music and light. His bronze skin, the dark cloak draped richly over his shoulders, and the divine poise in every movement completely consumed Medea's soul. She was no longer just a princess or a powerful sorceress. She was the prisoner of her own emotions, burning with fiery and painful desire. Love had directed its relentless, piercing arrows into the deepest recesses of Medea's being. This ineffable pain tormented her delicate nerve endings and the most sensitive depths of her neck, like an ember smoldering from within. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest, shaken with an uncontrollable rhythm. This trembling was as rhythmic and uncontrollable as sunlight reflecting on the walls, bouncing rapidly and quivering like it had leapt from a cauldron of water. As she watched Jason leave the palace, Medea's spirit followed him as if in a dream. She could not rid her mind of his face, the dark garments on his shoulders, the place he had sat, or his passage through the door. Her mind burned with the thought that such a hero would never appear again. Medea had already begun to mourn him as if dead, for she feared the fire-breathing bulls would annihilate him in a humiliating fate, reducing him to ashes. This boundless mercy strained her tear ducts, and a round burning tear slipped down her cheek. As the sorceress daughter of Colchis and the Scythian queen, she faced a relentless internal struggle at the thought of defying her father, and thus her people. Her heart was commanded by love, while her mind was shadowed by shame and fear. Eros's arrow had captured not her consciousness but her will. For a moment, she considered giving Jason the magical potions to calm the bulls. It was the imperative of love. For a moment she considered doing nothing, allowing herself to perish in this pain, silently yielding to fate. This was the final resistance of honor. And for a moment she considered neither dying nor giving the potions, simply enduring the pain in silence. This was pure helplessness. Yet the wheels of fate had begun to turn, unstoppable. At the height of Medea's emotional struggle, her sister Chalciope, Phrixus's wife in Colchis, and her son Argus, who assisted the Argonauts, intervened. Chalciope's tears and the mortal danger faced by her son shattered Medea's last resistance. Love and mercy now claimed victory over honor and fear. As Medea's emotional struggle reached its peak, she resolved to meet Jason in secret. Jason, having learned of this, summoned her to a secluded spot far from the watchful eyes of his companions. Medea, evading her father and the palace's suspicious gaze, hid her face beneath a bright veil, her heart fluttering like a frightened dove as she made her way to the secret rendezvous. The meeting took place in a dim grove along the banks of the Phasis River, in divine silence. Jason drew great strength and hope from her presence. Medea, however, had to demand a price for providing this aid, for she was committing absolute betrayal against her father. In Greece, Jason required a legitimate status alongside her. Love did not demand a dishonorable escape. It demanded a lawful and honorable union. Medea spoke to Jason with trembling yet absolute determination. Her voice carried the power of a woman standing on the edge of her own destiny. She was ready to help him evade Aeetes' cruelty and accomplish the dangerous task ahead. But there was a condition. "If you swear that you will make me your lawful wife and take me from Colchis to Greece, to safe waters," she said, locking her gaze with his, "then I will deliver the Golden Fleece to you and provide every assistance you need to yoke those fire-breathing bulls." Jason, faced with the depth of her tears and the intensity of her love, was immediately overcome by the divine curse known as Love the Destroyer. He hesitated not a moment and swore before time and gods, "If I escape death and return safely to the Achaean lands, and Aeetes does not set a worse trial before us, I will neither forget you by night nor by day. I will marry you and make you the queen of my homeland." Jason then told Medea about his homeland and compared her to Ariadne, daughter of the famous Minos who had helped Theseus in the Labyrinth on Crete. Fully entrusting his hope to this foreign woman, aware of how desperate and pitiful his situation was, he accepted Medea's offer and aid. In that dim grove between heroism, cunning, and forbidden magic, a secret and binding agreement was forged, sealing the fate of two souls. Medea would keep the promise she had made to Jason. Immediately after their secret agreement in the secluded grove, she conveyed to him the magical tools and meticulous ritual instructions required for him to successfully complete his tasks. This was no longer merely a battle mission. It was a terrifying bargain made with the chthonic goddesses of the underworld. Medea's first instruction required Jason, just before beginning his quest, to appease the night goddess Hecate. Hecate, the fearsome goddess of witchcraft, ghosts, and crossroads, could only be summoned in whispers and shadows. Medea's instructions were extremely precise and demanded absolute solitude. When the night split in two, midnight, Jason was to go, completely alone and separate from his companions, to a wild, desolate place. He was to bathe in the relentless current of the Phasis River and wear a dark black garment the color of mourning. Finally, he was to dig a round pit in the ground, sacrifice a lamb within it, and burn it whole. Jason carried out the final part of the ritual, exactly as Medea had instructed. At the edge of the burning sacrificial pile, he poured sweet honey collected from beehives by Hecate Brimo, daughter of Perses, in order to appease the goddess. The scent of the lamb's blood and burning flesh, mingled with the steam of the cold Phasis waters, thickened the air. Seeking the goddess's favor with utmost care, he swiftly withdrew from the sacrificed offering. Neither footsteps nor the barking of infernal hounds could force him to return, for looking back would have drawn upon him the goddess's unforgiving wrath. Hecate's appearance was terrifying. From the deepest reaches of the underworld, she approached Aeson's son's sacrifice with a deafening roar. Terrifying snakes coiled around her, winding through oak branches, each one glowing like a torch that illuminated the shadows. The hellhounds around her bayed sharply, their cries radiating a bone-chilling cold. At her step, the meadows trembled, and the water spirits inhabiting the swamps and river of Phasis screamed. Though fear gripped Jason, he did not look back until he returned to his companions. By dawn, as the first rays of light shone over the snowy Caucasus, Jason had reached a safe harbor. At daybreak, following Medea's instructions, Jason dipped the magical ointment, pharmacon, he had received into water. This elixir, carefully prepared by Medea with a combination of chosen herbs and dark spells, would grant him absolute invulnerability to the fire-breathing bull's flames for a single day. The source of this miraculous ointment was legendary. According to some accounts, it was made from the blood that dripped from the rock where the Titan Prometheus was held in the Caucasus Mountains. It was not merely a potion, but the distilled power of a divine curse and sacrifice. Jason anointed first his shield, spear, and sword with the mixture. Then he spread the cold, slippery ointment over his bare body. As he applied it, an indescribable, tireless, tremendous power, terrible prowess, flowed from his flesh into his spirit. His hands and arms bristled with concentrated energy. He was no longer merely human. Touched by Medea's magic, he had become almost a demigod. Even his companions tested his newfound power, and strikes with the sword ricocheted from the ointment-coated spear. The heroes cried out with joy, their hopes soaring. Jason, like a battle-ready warhorse, pawed the ground, demonstrating his new strength. With Medea's magical aid, Jason set sail toward Ares' plain to complete the tasks he had once thought impossible. King Aeetes and the Colchian tribes gathered along the Caucasus heights and riverbanks to witness the bloody spectacle. The air was thick with tense anticipation. After the ship docked, Jason stepped onto the stage with his spear and shield. His body bare, he resembled Ares in form and Apollo in bearing. He approached the sturdy iron yoke and plow. From an invisible underground chamber, a gift of Hephaestus, two colossal, fire-breathing bulls emerged. Flames erupted from their mouths. The heroes trembled at the sight, but Jason planted his feet like a rocky reef in the sea, resisting the bulls' charge. The burning heat struck him like lightning, but Medea's magic protected him. The flames felt no hotter than a warm summer breeze. Jason wasted no time. He grasped the horns of one bull and with all his strength forced it to its knees. He did the same with the second bull. Throwing his shield to one side, he moved swiftly from side to side, keeping the beasts kneeling. Even King Aedes marveled at Jason's superhuman strength. The sons of Tyndareus, Castor and Pollux, brought the yoke and fastened it to the bulls' necks. Jason, like a master Pelasgian farmer, urged the bulls forward, expertly guiding the plow made of adamant. By the third part of the day, afternoon, tireless Jason had finished plowing the field. He separated the plow from the bulls and drove them toward the plain. Now it was time to sow the ominous Aeonian dragon's teeth given by Aeetes, the seeds from a fearsome serpent. Jason filled his helmet with the sharp teeth and planted them in the dark, tilled soil. As Aeetes had foretold, armed men, earthborn Spartoi, immediately sprang up from the sown teeth. Ares' plain overflowed with bronze-armored shields, double-tipped spears, and gleaming helmets. The scene resembled storm clouds dispersing to reveal shining stars. As the warriors emerged from the soil, the air seemed ablaze. These giants would spare not a single man. Jason recalled Medea's cunning advice in the face of this horror. If you see the giants sprouting from the soil, hurl an invisible, enormous stone among them. They will fall upon it like starving dogs fighting for food and kill each other. Then you can rush into the midst of the battle. Jason executed her plan. He picked up a massive, round stone, far too heavy for 4 strong men to lift, the disc of Ares and Iolcus, and hurled it into the middle of the Spartoi. The stone's crash ignited the battle. Jason, safely behind his shield, watched as the Colchians screamed, and Aeetes was struck dumb with astonishment. The Spartoi immediately attacked the stone, their rage and sudden fury sealing their fate. They began killing one another. Jason seized the chaos, drew his sword, and plunged into the field. The warriors, rising from the earth only to shoulder height or not yet fully upright, were cut down as if they were crops in a fasting farmer's field. The furrows were soaked with blood like irrigation channels. Jason's victory was absolute and merciless. Jason's superhuman completion of the tasks struck King Aetes' heart with pain and unspeakable grief. Aetes had believed with absolute certainty that the Greek hero would fail. This victory brought not only astonishment, but also a deep and ancestral fury, born of the fear that the prophecy of losing the Golden Fleece would come true. The king, son of the sun god Helios, had long heard a sinister oracle from his father, that if the Golden Fleece were ever stolen, he would lose his kingdom. Jason's success, achieved through powers far beyond mortal reach, revealed to Aetes that a betrayal from his own blood lay behind the Greeks' triumph. And the architect of that betrayal was none other than his sorceress daughter, Medea. The king absolutely refused to keep his promise. He would never give Jason the Golden Fleece. In a rage, he gathered the Colchians. Far from the palace, in a secret place, he assembled his warriors to prepare merciless tricks and calamities for the Argonauts. Aetes intended to burn the ship Argo and slaughter its crew, punishing the arrogance of Jason and his companions. But Medea, madly in love with Jason and now a traitor to her own father, foresaw her father's plans for vengeance. The poison of love had shattered every bond of blood. Medea rushed to Jason and warned him that her father had broken the agreement and was setting a bloody ambush against them. The mission had now changed, from completing Aetes' impossible trials to an act of sorcery, betrayal, and the theft of the Golden Fleece. Medea quickly set in motion the Argonauts' plan to flee from Colchis. Veiled by the darkness of day's end, Jason and Medea made their way to the heart of Colchis, to the sacred oak grove of the war god Ares. There, the Golden Fleece hung nailed to a massive oak tree, dazzling in its brilliance. The guardian who watched over it was no ordinary being. It was an immortal, sleepless dragon. This monster's lineage reached back to the oldest giants of myth, born of Typhon and Echidna. Its appearance was terrifying. Neither day nor night did it surrender its restless eyes to the sweetness of sleep. Its gaze, like two vast lanterns, pierced the darkness of the grove. For Jason, victory by strength alone was impossible. Medea, with her boundless mastery of sorcery, took upon herself the task of subduing the dragon. The glory of Jason and his companions now rested in the hands of this sorceress maiden. Medea approached the dragon with narcotic potions and enchanted ointment in hand. According to Apollonius, she stood before the dragon's wide, gleaming eyes and chanted magical incantations, mantras, sprinkling the beast's head with a soporific liquid using a freshly cut juniper branch. Her voice was like the whisper of wind through leaves, yet each word carried a venom that sank into the serpent's skin. Slowly, the cunningly prepared potion closed the dragon's relentless eyes. Under the poison's influence, it loosened its great neck and massive coils, collapsing to the ground with all its weight. The thud of its fall shattered the silence of Ares' grove. Jason seized the moment while the dragon slept. He swiftly tore the radiant, priceless Golden Fleece from the oak. The fleece emitted a bright golden light that illuminated the grove. Jason slung it over his shoulder, and its brilliance pierced the night's darkness like lightning breaking through the clouds. He was no longer merely a hero, but a thief bearing a divine treasure upon his shoulders. Before Aetes could gather the Colchians and spring his ambush, Jason and Medea fled swiftly to the Argo with the Golden Fleece in hand. Thanks to Medea's foresight and cunning, the Argonauts managed to set sail before dawn. As daylight broke, Argo was already speeding away from Colchis. When King Aetes realized his daughter's betrayal, the theft of the Golden Fleece, and the Argonauts' escape, his rage and wounded pride reached an unbearable height. At once, he dispatched his fastest warships and Colchian warriors to pursue them. This pursuit was more than a mere naval chase. It was a battle for the honor of Colchis. Their flight faced a threat far more personal than Aetes's fury, for the king's son and Medea's brother, Prince Absyrtus, was on their trail. Commanding 14 great warships, Absyrtus relentlessly pursued his sister, determined to capture the Argonauts. According to the most widespread and dramatic version of the myth, Medea used her brother Absyrtus as a pawn in her rebellion against their father. After the Argonauts crossed into the Adriatic Sea, Absyrtus arrived with the Colchian fleet to reclaim his sister and the stolen fleece, seeking to negotiate with them. Medea lured Absyrtus into a trap, promising to meet him on a sacred island of Artemis and convincing him to come alone. Absyrtus, wishing to believe his sister's remorse, fell into the treacherous snare at his most vulnerable moment. Jason, driven by the destructive love of Medea, felt no need to honor even a fair duel. He ambushed Absyrtus in cold blood. In the silent, hidden place, Jason drew his bare sword and slaughtered Absyrtus as a butcher slaughters an ox. Medea, veiling her face, turned away so as not to see her brother's blood. This act of brutality was the blood-stained proof of the wound carved in Medea's heart by Eros's arrow. To atone for the murder, Jason dismembered Absyrtus's body, performing a savage ritual in a futile attempt to pay for the treacherous deed. Yet the spilling of kin's blood summoned Zeus's wrath upon the Argonauts. The great god could not overlook such deceitful murder. Storms arose, driving the ship from its course and casting them into unknown waters. The Golden Fleece on Jason's shoulders now bore not only the weight of wealth, but also the burden of divine fury and fraternal blood. The talking prow of the ship spoke with the voice of prophecy, guiding them. Zeus's wrath would not cease until the Argonauts reached Ausonia, Italy, and were purified by the sorceress Circe, Medea's aunt. And so, to cleanse themselves of their pollution, the Argonauts crossed the Tiber River and arrived at Aea, where Circe dwelled. Circe, Medea's kinswoman, alone could wash away the stain of such deep betrayal and murder. Though Circe purified Jason and Medea, she could not erase the mark on their souls. The Argonauts had not set sail towards salvation, but into a cursed journey of return. Jason's completion of the impossible tasks and his capture of the Golden Fleece pierced King Aeetes' heart with a pain beyond words, driving him mad with fear that the prophecy of losing his kingdom would come true. The Golden Fleece was the symbol of Colchis's wealth and advanced metallurgical technology. Though Jason's mission could be seen as a historical expedition, the theft of the fleece and the spilling of innocent blood showed that this treasure had become a cursed burden. The Argonauts' doomed return was no longer just a tale of glory and triumph. It became the story of how love, betrayal, and the most dreadful stain of murder, miasma, became etched into the souls of heroes. On the wild shores of Colchis, they had seized the Golden Fleece, yet their escape, like their gain, was woven by Medea's sorcery into a frantic and bloody haste, for their flight brought with it a sin the earth itself would never forgive, the death of King Aeetes' son and Medea's younger brother Absyrtus. Whether Medea scattered her brother's dismembered limbs into the sea to delay her father, or lured him into a treacherous ambush for Jason to strike him down with a naked blade, whatever bloody truth had transpired, the result was the same. The shedding of brotherly blood placed upon Jason and Medea an indelible pollution of murder, miasma. This vile act had shattered the divine order. Because of this tainted crime, Zeus revealed his wrath by unleashing violent storms that threw the Argonauts off course. The storm drove the Argo so far astray that it was finally carried into the raging, muddy mouth of the Istros, Danube River. The route suggested by their guide Argus was not merely a geographic escape, but an enchanted waterway they had to traverse to seek release from the curse of miasma. Departing from the salty waters of the Black Sea, the Argo entered the cold brown waters of the Istros, rowing for days through the unknown lands of the Scythians, yet without cleansing their souls of the dreadful pollution, miasma. Returning home to Hellas was impossible. From the talking prow of the ship, crafted by Athena from the sacred oak of Dodona, came a command. They had to find the sorceress Circe and be purified. As the Argo sailed from the Adriatic toward the Mediterranean, it reached Aeaea, the terrifying and magnificent island of Circe, known for turning strangers into beasts. This was the home of Circe, Medea's aunt. Circe received Jason and Medea. They tried to conceal the murder, but Circe, with a single gaze, sensed the blood-stained corruption, the foul miasma, clinging to them. Out of respect for their kinship and the divine laws, Circe performed a ritual of purification, a catharsis for Jason and Medea. In Circe's garden, dark and mysterious herbs were burned, sacred waters were poured, and while Jason and Medea knelt with faces smeared in ash and blood, forgotten words of ancient magic flowed from Circe's lips. But when the ritual was over, Circe saw with the clarity of Helios's light the horror of the murder and Medea's betrayal of her father. Disgusted by this act, she cursed Jason for violating the sacred laws of hospitality and ordered them to leave her island at once. Though their spirits were lightened by the ceremonial cleansing, Jason and Medea were forced to continue their journey, dragging behind them the heavy shadows of guilt and betrayal. Leaving Circe's accursed island, the Argo entered perilous waters, where two of the most feared dangers of Mediterranean myth awaited. Hera had instructed the sea goddess Thetis to aid Jason and the Argonauts. As they neared the island of the Sirens, the sea fell silent, and the Sirens began to sing their deadly melodies, with a long voice and a seductive tone. The moment the Argonauts heard the divine song, they dropped their oars and began steering toward that cursed shore. At that critical instant, the Thracian bard Orpheus intervened. With his lyre, he played a melody that overpowered the sirens' voices, not one that dulled the heroes, but one that enchanted and gave life. Orpheus's music was so powerful that the sailors ignored the deadly call of the sirens. Yet every curse demands a price. One Argonaut, Butes, could not resist even Orpheus's divine melody, and in despair leapt into the sea toward the Sirens. After passing the Sirens, the Argo approached the narrow strait between Sicily and Italy, where Scylla and Charybdis awaited. On one side was Charybdis, swallowing the sea in giant whirlpools. On the other, Scylla, the monstrous six-headed creature of terror. By Hera's command, the sea goddess Thetis and her Nereid sisters surrounded the Argo. Thetis guided the ship through the chasms of Scylla and Charybdis, holding its keel in her hands to shield it from destruction. The Nereids helped it pass by the width of a single hair, escaping through the narrowest passage without even the slightest damage. The heroes were crushed under the weight of this divine protection. Having survived the horror of Scylla and Charybdis, the Argo finally reached the island of Phaeacia, Drepane, ruled by King Alcinous and Queen Arete, renowned for their justice and hospitality. In this heavenly refuge, the vengeful fleet of the Colchians caught up with them once again. The Colchian warriors demanded that Medea be returned to them. King Alcinous promised a fair judgment. If Medea was still a virgin, she would be returned to her father, but if she were Jason's wife, she would remain on the island. Queen Arete pitied Medea. That night, moved by secret compassion, she arranged for Jason and Medea to marry hastily in a sacred cave. By morning, Alcinous declared his verdict. Medea was now a woman and a lawful wife. Thus she could not be surrendered to the Colchians. Fearing Aet's wrath, the Colchians begged Alcinous to allow them to stay on the island as companions to the Argonauts, rather than return home for punishment. 7 days after their marriage, the Argo departed from Drepane, carried by a gentle west wind sent by Zeus. They were now cleansed and protected by a divine union. Yet setting foot again on their homeland, Hellas was not yet written in their fate. Despite the divine protection, storms once again drove the Argo off course, casting them onto the southern coasts of Libya in the Mediterranean. The Argonauts were forced to haul the ship across shallow waters under the scorching desert sun for days. This effort was like a punishment testing their very souls. Having overcome these arduous seas, they finally reached the last great stop on their return journey, the island of Crete. But Crete was guarded by one of mythology's most extraordinary and terrifying sentinels, the bronze giant Talos. Talos hurled massive rocks from jagged cliffs to prevent the Argonauts from anchoring on the shore. He belonged to the race of bronze. His invincibility was due to the divine blood, ichor, flowing through his body. Exhausted and parched, Jason and his companions faced the impossibility of resisting a power of bronze, and they were on the brink of being driven helplessly away from Crete. In this desperate moment, the formidable force brought by the cursed marriage intervened once again. Jason's wife, Medea. She called out to the Argonauts, urging them to fight rather than surrender. Talos's defeat would be achieved through Medea's cunning and magical prowess. Although the giant was invulnerable in most of his body, he possessed a single vital weakness, a vein running from his neck to his ankle. The tip of this life-bearing vein lay beneath a thin layer of skin at the ankle, and according to some sources, it was sealed by a bronze nail. Medea's method became one of mythology's most dramatic stratagems. In the most common account, she approached Talos and tricked him into removing the bronze nail that made him mortal. In a more epic version, she used her magical powers to bewilder Talos's mind. As he hurled rocks at the ship, he scraped his ankle against a sharp stone. From the thin layer of skin at the scrape, the nail blocking his vein was dislodged, and his ichor, the divine blood, flowed out like molten lead. Once his ichor began to pour, Talos could no longer stand upright for long. Like a massive pine half-cut atop a mountain, he swayed in the wind before collapsing to the ground with a tremendous, echoing crash. The Guardian of Crete had been defeated, and the Argo's path was clear. The Argonauts spent the night in the wake of Talos's downfall and, passing over Aegina, finally returned to their homeland in Iolcus, Thessaly. After a long and grueling journey, the Argonauts finally reached their homeland Iolcus, alongside Jason, who was sworn to reclaim the throne. Jason believed that the dazzling brilliance of the Golden Fleece on his shoulder would restore his former glory. Yet upon his return, he received devastating news. His father, Aeson, had perished under the oppressive rule of his uncle Pelias, who had usurped the throne. There was no throne to reclaim now, only a bloody inheritance of vengeance. King Pelias, who had seized the throne, harbored an absolute belief that his nephew would never return alive. When he had sent Jason on Colchis's impossible quests, he had no hope whatsoever that Jason would survive Ari's fire-breathing bulls, the sleepless dragon, or the giants that sprang from the earth. On the contrary, he was certain that Jason would perish in these impossible tasks. Even though Jason had succeeded in bringing back the Golden Fleece, Pelias broke the oath he had sworn to surrender the throne. His face hardened with arrogance and fear of prophecy. Pelias mocked Jason's victory and refused categorically to give up the throne. Yet Pelias's cruel defiance marked the arrival of Hera's long-awaited vengeance. Jason realized that, though he had seized the Golden Fleece by force, he could not reclaim the throne by sheer strength. Surrendering to the web of fate, he was compelled to seek the magical aid of Medea, the very center of the prophecy. He was no longer the flawless hero who had retrieved the fleece, nor the legitimate heir. He was merely the husband of a witch. The glory Jason had earned now carried a shadow, weighed down by the curse of blood guilt. Unable to exact vengeance through physical might, he surrendered to Medea's terrifying intellect. Medea, to exact revenge, employed one of a witch's most subtle and ruthless stratagems, targeting the pure and innocent love Pelias's daughters bore for their father, the spell of rejuvenation. One afternoon in the courtyard of the Iolcus palace, before the eyes of the astonished Argonauts and the gathered townspeople, a massive rusted bronze cauldron was set upon the stone floor. Within it, Medea's brew, an emerald, viscous potion distilled from Colchis's most secret and poisonous herbs, bubbled over a roaring flame. Its steam, sweet and hypnotic, clouded the minds of all who watched. Amid this misty haze, Medea brought forth an old fleece-shedding ram before the daughters of Pelias. Whispering incantations in her cold, otherworldly voice, she slaughtered the ram. The daughters' cries of shock and horror hung frozen in the air. One by one, she cast the bloody parts into the boiling, greenish, thick potion. Her eyes fixed on the cauldron, her face revealing neither grief nor triumph, Medea tapped her fingers upon the rim. At that instant, the surface of the potion foamed and burst, and from within sprang a living, tender, snow-white lamb, blinking in amazement, radiating the purity of youth and life, imprinting the reality of the miracle upon the onlookers' minds. This miraculous act of rejuvenation instantly convinced Pelias's daughters of Medea's power. With grace, Medea instructed them that, out of their love for their father, the ritual must be carried out by their own hands. That night, grief-stricken yet hopeful, the daughters crept into their father's chamber. King Pelias lay in the heavy, melancholic sleep of old age. Standing over him with knives in hand, their hearts torn between endless love for their father and the good they intended to perform, they enacted the horrific deed. They killed their father, dismembered his aged body, and cast the pieces into the boiling cauldron at Medea's direction. Pelias did not rise as a ram, nor was he rejuvenated. Only blood spread across the surface of the boiling water like a black, sticky foam. Confronted with their father's dismembered remains rather than a young lamb, the daughters teetered on the edge of madness. The horror of the murder and Medea's cold treachery pierced their hearts. Thus Jason's revenge was completed through Medea's craft. The cruel uncle who had usurped the throne was eliminated by his own children. Medea's nightmarish deception froze the city of Iolcus in a tableau of blood and terror. In the eyes of the people, Jason and Medea were no longer a heroic rescuing pair. They had become a bloodthirsty sorceress and her pliant pawn. Arcastus, the son of the slain King Pelias, filled with the fire of vengeance, seized the throne. It must be remembered that Acastus had once fought shoulder to shoulder with Jason on the deck of the Argo, yet his father's murder obliterated all bonds of brotherhood and vows of heroism. The new king's first and most decisive decree was to banish Jason and Medea from Iolcus immediately. Despite having returned with the Golden Fleece, Jason neither avenged his father honorably nor reclaimed the throne. His oath condemned him to a cursed exile brought about by Medea's destructive love. Banished from Iolcus, the couple set sail for Athens, carrying with them only the cursed weight of the Golden Fleece and the indelible shadow of the crimes they had committed. In exile, the couple sought refuge along the coasts of Achaea and finally found sanctuary in Corinth, ancient Ephyra, where the memory of their fame and the Argo still held some sway. Creon, the ruler of Corinth, welcomed them with generous hospitality out of respect for Jason's legendary past. Here, Jason and Medea lived for 10 years in relative peace and happiness. During this time, Medea bore him 2 sons, Murmurus and Pheres. These children were not only proof of Medea's enduring love for Jason, but also her sole anchor in the Greek world. As a foreigner, she kept her sorcery concealed, striving to integrate into Greek society as a devoted wife and mother. Yet, the blood of her brother and of Pelias lay in the depths of their souls like a silent poison. But this peace, brief as it was, ended within a decade, undone by the fundamental flaw in Jason's character: ambition and insatiable desire. He could no longer be content with a quiet, unremarkable exile, however precious the memories of adventure. He wanted a throne, a kingdom, and security. His eyes, once softened by time and Medea's maternal exhaustion, now turned toward Glauce, or Creusa, Creon's young, beautiful, and politically invaluable daughter. Jason's coarse, calculating mind concluded that if he abandoned Medea, leaving her behind in Colchis, and married Glauce, he would gain not only wealth and glory, but also the throne of Corinth. To Jason, it was a golden opportunity. To Medea, it was the ultimate and most devastating betrayal of vows and sacrifices. Jason attempted to cast aside the woman who had followed him to the ends of Colchis, the one who had risked everything for him, sending her and their children back into exile. Medea's eyes no longer shed tears. Only a volcanic, icy rage burned within them. She confronted Jason, a man bound by the laws of Zeus, demanding why he dared forsake her. Her voice carried the roar of the storms of the Black Sea. "Ungrateful man, I gave the golden soil of Colchis, my father's kingdom, and my brother's life for you. You, who could never have claimed the Golden Fleece, and now you dare, in defiance of the oaths of the gods, to invite the wrath of the heavens upon yourself." Jason's reply dripped with arrogance and ingratitude. He claimed that marrying Glauce was not an act of hostility toward Medea, but a means to secure the Corinthian throne and provide his children with a political future and inheritance. Hearing this revolting logic, the last spark of mercy in Medea's heart extinguished. Jason was abandoning the one who had given her shelter and protection. In response, Medea began to conceive the most terrible act of vengeance her life would know. King Creon, aware of Medea's sorcery and the grim fate of Pelias, sought to banish her from Corinth once Jason's marriage plans were confirmed. Medea, furious and grief-stricken, pleaded for a few more days to remain, buying herself time. Deep within her mind, only one purpose remained: to make Jason suffer an agony that multiplied the betrayal he had committed. Medea's first step targeted Glauce. She gathered the finest, most magnificent fabrics in the palace and soaked them in waters infused with Colchis' deadliest poisons, and enchanted them with the most destructive flames of the earth. This was no ordinary poison. It was a devouring, adhesive curse. Presenting it as a wedding gift, she instructed her children to deliver it to their future mother, Glauce. The innocence of her children concealed the cunning of her plan. The young and proud Glauce immediately donned the dress and crown. As soon as the garments touched her, the poisonous enchantment activated. The fabric clung to her delicate frame, erupting in uncontrollable, excruciatingly intense flames. This was no ordinary fire. The cold, adhesive blaze burned her skin and fused to her flesh, separating it from bone, as if the silky fabric had become a part of her body. Her screams, akin to the cries of a tortured animal, filled the palace. As she struggled to remove the dress, the adhesive curse deepened, cutting into her bleeding body. King Creon, rushing to save his daughter, found in horror that the cursed dress had fused to his own hands as he tried to pull her free. Father and daughter, entwined in a final embrace, burned together on Corinth's marble floor like melting statues, perishing in the flames. Jason's ambition, the throne he sought, lay buried in ashes and poison, cursed for eternity. When Jason arrived at Creon's palace, the sight surpassed even the horrors of his perilous journey to seize the Golden Fleece. Every symbol of his political power had been consumed by flames. At that moment, he realized that Medea's wrath was the inevitable price of breaking divine oaths. Driven by ambition, blinded by ingratitude, he had lost everything. Yet Medea was preparing to deliver the ultimate blow. Only two things remained: the memory of the Argo and their two sons, Mermerus and Pheris. To punish Jason fully, it was not enough to take his life. No, Medea sought to imprison him forever in grief, forcing him as an old man to sit beneath the decaying shadow of the Argo, counting what he had lost rather than what he had gained. This decision shattered the rest of Medea's soul. As a betrayed wife, exiled foreigner, and mother, she now poisoned her own spirit. This was not merely vengeance, it was a self-inflicted death, a final act of erasing everything shared with Jason from the world. Calling her sons close, she gazed upon their innocent faces, the sole proof of her love for Jason. Knowing that to destroy them would also destroy her spirit, she proceeded. In this horrifying act, Medea strangled her children with her own hands. It was the single, absolute, and eternal path to punish Jason. Jason, rushing to confront Medea, was met with an even more unbearable sight. Medea, with the lifeless bodies of their children, ascended into the sky in a chariot drawn by winged dragons sent by her ancestor, the sun god Helios. The chariot was proof of her divine lineage, the final evidence that she was no mortal but a bearer of divine curse. Jason knelt on the ground, forced to witness his wife's betrayal, the death of his new bride, the burning of his father-in-law, and now the slaughter of his children. He had set out to claim the Golden Fleece and the throne, only to lose everything in his life. Alone in Corinth, Jason clung to the decaying wreck of the Argo, the sole constant in his ruined life. Years passed, and he grew old, destitute, and abandoned. He would sit beneath the shadow of the Argo, recounting his adventures to passing sailors who no longer wished to believe in the exploits of a man who had once dared the impossible. Fate delivered the final, cruelest blow. One afternoon, as Jason napped in the Argo's shade, the sacred mast, carved from the holy oak of Dodona, rotted with age and collapsed, crushing him beneath it. Jason died beneath the very mast that had begun his legendary voyage. Thus the saga of the Golden Fleece concluded, a grim testament to love, betrayal, and the price of broken oaths. Jason's cursed journey did not end with the acquisition of the fleece, but with the cost of abandoning Medea, a story of divine wrath, a witch's vengeance, and blood-stained souls eternally scarred. Jason met his end crushed beneath the wreckage of the Argo, the monument to all his victories, yet now burdened with a curse. At the conclusion of that ominous path he had devoted his life to for glory and triumph. This ending was not merely a physical collapse. It was the grim manifestation of a punishment, showing that his ambition, his betrayal of Medea, and his bloody adventures had all been in vain, that the long shadow of his sins had finally caught up with him. The price of every adventure, every sin had at last clung to him, and his shining ideals of heroism were shattered amid the tangled knots of sorcery, murder, and deceit. According to legend, this tragic end was the fulfillment of that ancient curse echoed in the verses of the Abkhaz poet Mushni La Furia. Be forever deprived of the golden fleece, may your veins dry up. The rage that burst forth from Medea's heart darkened the spirit of the sea and turned into a merciless storm that blocked Jason's path home. The sky blackened like coal, and the sea's massive foaming claws gripped the magnificent hull of the Argo. With one final convulsion, the ship, once known as the Destroyer, the Banisher, and the Guide of Death, broke apart, its bow collapsing upon its master, Jason. The glorious journey that began with its shining hull ended beneath a rusted, soaking nightmare. Yet the epic does not end with the wretched downfall of a hero. Jason's collapse also heralds the return and triumph of Medea. In the Abkhaz telling, Medea is not the victim of betrayal, but rather a figure of victory, a woman with the radiance of the sun, shaped by her beauty and her people's love. The curse cast upon the Argonauts came true, and Jason, who pursued the Golden Fleece, paid for his sins by being crushed beneath the Argo. Thus, Medea's fury toward those who plundered her homeland was finally appeased, and she returned to her throne as an innocent and blameless queen. In this version, her brother Apsyrtus, who perished fighting Jason, is remembered as a noble son who fought for his sister and his homeland, while the Argonauts are forever marked in history as mere looters and invaders. The conflict between Medea and Jason in Greek mythology takes on an entirely different form in Abkhaz and Georgian folk narratives. In these lands, Medea is not a sorceress, but a protector of science, medicine, and metallurgy. Colchis, present-day Western Georgia, was not merely an exotic kingdom in antiquity, but also a center of advanced technical knowledge. The legendary radiance of the Golden Fleece is, in fact, the mythological reflection of ancient technology. The gold collecting method described by ancient writers such as Strabo, Pliny, and Appian, using sheepskins in the mountain rivers of Sphenati, is now recognized as early hydrometallurgy. The Golden Fleece is not a treasure, but a symbol of an engineering relationship with nature, a consciousness of civilization. In Georgian tradition, Medea personifies science and natural knowledge, while Jason becomes the invader, attempting to steal it. Jason's death beneath the wreck of the Argo marks not just the end of a man, but of an era. That death tells how ambition, when not transformed into knowledge, collapses under its own weight. Yet the truth behind the Golden Fleece proves the immortality of knowledge itself. This tragic and passionate story was carried into eternity by a divine touch. Merciful Zeus, perhaps out of respect for the magnitude of their adventures, or perhaps to teach humanity a lesson, placed the Argo among the stars as a constellation. Thus, the memory of that famed ship would remain forever, shining as a warning in the endless darkness of the night sky. When the Argo constellation gleams on the horizon at night, its light is not merely a memory of a myth. It is the remembrance of the first humans who sought to uncover metals, to understand nature, and to shape technology. The saga of Jason and the Argonauts continues to endure, not just as a tale of greed for the Golden Fleece, but as an immortal warning engraved into humanity's collective memory, telling of the complex outcomes of love, fear, betrayal, and the ideals of heroism. The real treasure was never gold. It was the knowledge, intellect, and eternal curiosity mankind created while searching for it. I hope this ancient epic has been a beautiful story to close your day. I look forward to your thoughts and requests. Don't forget to follow my channel. Love.